Hello, coders. Welcome to another How to Code Well podcast. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. I haven't done, and I don't mean the PHP elephant, but the elephant in the sense that I haven't done one of these in many, many months, and I haven't done any How to Code Well live streams in many months. I will perhaps talk about some of the reasons behind that maybe later, but one thing it does give you, having time off, having time away from social media, having time away from researching the topics that I talk about on the podcast, having that time off and then coming back to that space, you realize that actually not a lot has changed. Not really a huge amount has changed. And then you start asking questions. Well, weren't we promised all of the technology advances in things like VR and AI and ML and Web3 and all the other things that we were being pushed by the people on Twitter and by the I can't say the word evangelists of those things, and yet here I am, say 5 months down the line, and I can't really see much difference, to be honest. And now I might seem like I'm coming out really negative, and I do appreciate that there are people working really hard in those spaces, and I don't want to discredit them because they are working on the fringe, the above the curve. But I was under the impression perhaps that the majority of us now would be within that curve, or, you know, there'll be something else to look forward to. And it doesn't appear to be like that. Like, for example, the amount of articles I've read recently where it's like your programming job is now under risk, right? Is at risk with artificial intelligence. It's like, no, it's not. No, it's not. No. No, it's not. Or everyone is going to be doing virtual reality meetings. Like every meeting you're going to be in is going to now be in the VR space. No, it's not. No, it's not. Or everything now is going to be on the blockchain. So your databases, your relational databases, they will now be on the blockchain. No, it's not. And I guess today I kind of want to address why I think that is, and also what I think might be happening in the web space. Because being away for like 5 months and coming back, you do get a sense of like a temperature. I think if I was within those 5 months, if I was doing the amount of research that I normally do for the podcast episodes, I would be part of the hype train. I would be part of the push to try and convince people to get off of or install, say, Copilot, or install, sign up to ChatGPT, because I would probably be saying something like, you know, you need to do this to advance your career. I don't think that's a thing now. I mean, I honestly don't think that you need, as a developer, you need to have Copilot installed. I don't think so. I think as a developer, you need to... I don't have it installed, and I'm doing perfectly fine. But I've been to conferences. I know people. I've sat next to people with it installed, and the tool, and that's what it is, a tool, is great. However, there are, let's just say, business factors that have to come into play when you're giving some artificial intelligence information about your code base and also information about your business. So there are factors, a lot of people, a lot of organizations, companies do not like the idea of their developers giving some service a lot of information about their business and how their code base hangs together, especially if that service is shared across other companies. So you may find that the organizations and companies that you work for actually put out a blanket message saying no AI or no Copilot can be installed on developers' machines. In some places, that isn't a thing, But I think one needs to be quite cautious and actually ask the IT department, if you have one, or ask your delivery manager, your PM, is it okay if I was to install this? Now, what I've just discussed is a barrier of entry, all right? And there are other barriers of entry to using AI within your team, because AI isn't just for the code, right? Copilot is just one tool that utilizes AI. But there is also other tools that you can get that will help with the Scrum Agile side of stuff. And that's where you have to give a lot of the AI beast, a lot of business knowledge, which is kind of terrifying from a company's point of view, right? Because it's all intellectual property. And if that service is being used by another company, for example, there is the risk of information bleed. Not a lot of people talk about this, right? Because everyone's like, oh, every AI is going to take over our jobs and it's going to make things a whole lot easier. And therefore, as developers, it's going to be more difficult to get your jobs. Well, I actually don't think that's the case. If the business risk wasn't there and everybody used AI and used Copilot and used AI for their other business needs, then I actually think that developers would be given more work to do. And also there would be a greater push on developers being taught, or learning, I should say, developers learning how to prompt the AI, because that's part of the process, right? So actually asking the right questions to the right service to get the right response. That is in itself a skill. However, I don't believe that, I haven't read, and I could be wrong, and please do put your comments down, but I don't know of any company that has replaced a developer because of AI. Like on a one-to-one basis. Your job has now been replaced because we have something that can do your prompts. I don't think that's a thing. I think what we may see is that things start getting built a little quicker, and perhaps bugs are addressed sooner. Maybe. I mean, that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing. But like I said, there is the business risk behind it. Now, there's also so that's why I don't think AI has taken off in the way we were told it would be. Let's now pivot as a business buzzword. Let's pivot to talk about Web3. Okay, so I do crypto. I have invested in crypto. I have mined crypto. I have tried to learn as much as I can about the blockchain. And oh my word, there is a lot to learn about the blockchain. There were some groups that were saying that now relational databases are dead and everything is going to be on the blockchain, but that hasn't happened, and I don't think that ever will happen. I think perhaps that will happen for specific niche needs, right? Really niche. But I can't see that going ahead in the general sense of the word, right? SQL is here to stay, and it will stay for as long as as long as web development is around. So will SQL, in my opinion. So I don't think that's going to happen, and I don't think that we have to rush to learn the blockchain. I don't believe that junior developers need to worry about the blockchain, because there is just so much out there that uses other data store engines. I think perhaps the concept of the blockchain needs to be learnt, but perhaps not the code, and also just the frameworks that are using the blockchain. Perhaps you don't need to worry about those, especially if you don't know the basics of, say, JavaScript. Learn that first, and we'll talk about learning things in a minute. This podcast episode is a bit of a mishmash, man. I've been away for 5 months. I want to talk. So that's why I think Web3 hasn't really taken off. There's also the environmental factor as well. There's also the groups that are against it. And also because the big wigs, the companies that are really, that everybody uses on a day-to-day basis, the brands, the home brands, Facebook, Twitter, that kind of malarkey, Google, they haven't really pushed anything upon their consumers that requires the blockchain. Now, if that was to happen, then yes, this would be a different story, but they haven't. And that's where I'm taking my temperature pulse from. It's like if Google decided that actually the Google search index is now going to be on the blockchain, which is a terrible idea, then yeah, it'll be a different story. Or if suddenly the government decide that all house deeds need to be stored on the blockchain, then yeah, it would be a different idea. But that hasn't happened. And there's other things that the blockchain could be used for that hasn't happened either. And I think it's a case of, well, we have what we have right now and it's worked and it's generating us money. So why rock that boat? I haven't seen anything that is far superior that uses the blockchain that will replace anything that we're doing right now. And that really is the crux of it, right? Yeah, you've got some really interesting projects, but to be honest, the size of those projects and the complexities of those projects are nowhere near, or they're too high for taking over what's currently there. So that's, but I do think that the Web3 does have its place, but in the very niche sort of areas. What else was there? Virtual reality, VR. Why on earth are we not in VR meetings? I think it really all boils down to the fact that you've got to put a bloody headset on, and the damn thing only battery lasts for a few hours. And I don't really want to be immersed in my meeting, to be fair, or in my code base. I quite like the fact that there's a door out there and I can open it and go to the rest of the world, right? So I'm not a fan of working in VR. I don't think that will ever take off. Can you just imagine a VR meeting and everyone's in their own little avatars? Some are dressed as unicorns and some are dressed as monsters and stuff. I think that's just silly. It's just silly. When you come into work, right? So, I mean, that's the hard ass in me, but I don't think it's going to happen, right? That's not really a productive thing, right? Oh, I've got to just change my virtual reality avatar to have pink hair. Why? Why not just spend the time doing the work that you've been tasked to do? Or have a different colored shoes, or have a different head? Again, it's just silliness. And I don't think silliness is going to sell well in the business space at the end of the day. So yeah, that's basically where I think things are. I'm not saying that these areas have tried and failed. They're certainly trying and they are making progress, but the speed in which the progress has happened is just not as fast as perhaps one thought 5 months ago. So let's just talk now a little bit about programming in general. This is a coding podcast, so let's just talk about coding in general, because we have to address the fact that the market at the minute is just not good. The market for developers, the market for contractors, or even just permanent staff is not great. And there's many factors that would take far longer than this podcast episode I'm willing to mention, to talk about. One is the cost of living crisis. Just money in general is short. There are recessions. It's just not a nice time right now. It's just not a nice time. And so obviously people are trying to retain the talent that they have, or they're trying to reduce the amount of people in their workforce to regain some of that cost. I mean, that is the simpleness of it all, right? If I was to put it in a nutshell, people are trying to regain costs and get rid of unnecessary expenditure. And if you, maybe I shouldn't have said unnecessary expenditure, because hey, if you've been let go, I certainly don't want to label you as unnecessary, but you've got to see this as an opportunity. You need to see this as an opportunity. And I want to end today. I'm not going to talk about why I took 5 months off. I just decided to have a break. There we go. That's what I'm going to talk about. But to finish this podcast off, I want to talk about transcendence. Whoa, that's a weird thing, right? Transcendence. So, as a developer, it's very easy for developers to get stuck in a rut and go, right, I'm a PHP developer and I've been a PHP developer for 10 years or 5 years or 2 years, and I'm never going to change. Or I've been a JavaScript developer and I'm never going to come out being a JavaScript developer. I'm not even interested in the server. That's not my bag. Or even if you start niching it down, like I'm a PHP developer and all I do is Symfony and that's all I do. I think as developers, we need, and especially right now when the market is as backward as it is, we as developers need to transcend from the labels in which we impose upon ourselves. We need to detach from those. So if you are a PHP developer that just does Laravel, why don't you take a look at Symfony? Why don't you take a look at Slim PHP? Why don't you take a look at Python? You'll find that some concepts will transfer. Things like control flows, things like object orientation. And so you'll be able to pick up, say if you've been a PHP developer for 5 years, you will be able to pick up Python pretty quickly, or vice versa. And if you've just been a JavaScript developer and you've just been working on the front end, you haven't done any server stuff, now is the time to take a look at the back end. And vice versa. If you've just been working on the back end, now is the time to look at the front end. Why do I say all of this? It boils down to you have to, right now, try and expose yourselves to as many technologies as you can, because the market is it's not great. And therefore, you can't pick and choose. You can't say, oh, well, I don't want that job because it's not a Symfony job, or I don't want that job because it's not a Laravel job, or I don't want to have that job because it's a JavaScript job and it's Vue and I'm only a React developer and I'll be a React developer till I die. You can't have that mentality. You must be, in order to survive in this, you need to transcend from the labels that you put upon yourself. This may sound like I'm being very preachy, but I am concerned with the market. And I'm concerned that there are developers out there who have niched down so much that they're not interested. They won't even consider working on something different. And also there is a pride thing. So for example, if you've been working on JavaScript and you've discovered that there isn't any JavaScript jobs anymore, and therefore you need to go to Python, right? Ooh, well, now you're not going to be as good as Python as you are with JavaScript, which means that you're going to have to probably take a junior Python developer job, which means that you're going to need a pay cut, but it's going to secure you for the future. So it's one of those. It's one of those crazy, and I think, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get into the whole money side of stuff, but I think that if you can take like a boot camp, or if you can take a class, or if you can just watch some tutorials and build something and put it out there and then put that on your CV and say, hey, this is what I've built with this language that I'm not really used to. It's not a commercial product, but this is what I've done. Then you will be far more suited for a job using that technology than someone who just hasn't used that technology and they've just sent the CV off, right? If you can have that technology in your CV and then talk about that in your interview, because you're basically giving yourself the opportunity. You're opening it up. Also, just a side note, when you are looking for jobs, as I am right now. You need to also look at the other parts of the stack that work within the languages that you're working on. So, for example, I've been working on PHP for a while. However, there are other components that I've worked on that isn't PHP that perhaps are more prominent in other jobs. So, for example, maybe AWS, maybe Jenkins, maybe JavaScript, maybe Python, whatever. If they are more prominent in the other jobs, if they become more of a primary focus in the other jobs, you can still apply for those because you've done a little bit of work for that. On that, yes, you're probably not going to be as strong as the candidates who do that on a primary sense, but at least you're giving yourselves that opportunity. Essentially, what I'm saying is you want to be in a position where your CV is so littered with technology. Basically, I'm going against everything that perhaps I've said in the past about niching down. Now is not the time to niche down, people. Now is the time to open up your mind to the other possibilities of code. And it's not as terrifying as you might think, because a lot of the skills, as I said, are transferable from one thing to the next. Okay, people, I'm off. Thank you ever so much. It's been fun. I haven't done this in a while. I don't know when I'm going to be back. Who knows? Who knows if I'm even going to publish this? I don't know. Happy coding, everybody. Lots of love. Take care. Cheers. Bye-bye.